I was dangling 15 feet above my own driveway, spinning slowly in a harness while the HOA president screamed into her phone about airspace violations. Below me, a Channel 5 news van pulled up, its cameraman nearly tripping over a garden gnome to get the shot. Just 2 weeks earlier, all I wanted was to park my car in peace without starting a suburban turf war. Now here I was, preparing for a legal helicopter landing on my property while Denise Yarborough yelled something about aviation terrorism. If you're wondering how a calm, middle-aged guy with a passion for restoring classic muscle cars ended up in a literal air battle with his homeowners association, it all started with a driveway, one smug board member, and an entitled view of public space. It began as most suburban catastrophes dow with quiet, passive aggression. After retiring early from a 20-year career designing municipal systems, I thought I was ready for any kind of local bureaucracy. I was wrong. The first few months in the neighborhood were peaceful until I noticed a sleek black SUV repeatedly parking just a little too far onto my property. Then came the minivans, especially during brunch hours. My driveway isn't lined with a curb, it's angled and unmarked. I added reflective cones to clarify the space. 3 days later, a letter appeared in my mailbox. A typed notice in polished HOA language warning me that my cones violated aesthetic standards. I removed them, fuming silently. The very next morning, a silver Lexus parked completely across my driveway. My freshly tuned-up Camaro, the pride of my garage, was trapped. I knocked on doors until I found the Offend-era board member's niece hosting brunch. She smiled condescendingly. "It's just for a couple hours. You don't need your car, do you?" That was my first introduction to Denise Yarborough, our HOA president. Bleached bob, tan trench coat, clipboard that probably doubled as a medieval weapon. When I tried to explain that it was my property, she raised an eyebrow and said, "Are you absolutely sure about that?" I had the deed, surveyor maps, 3D renderings. Offered to show her. She declined. Take it up with the board. And so began the space war. Over the next 2 weeks, my driveway was blocked almost daily. I received 3 more letters. One accused me of painting curbs chalk, not paint. Another warned that a laminated sign reading "private driveway" was confrontational. Then, the ultimate slap, my Camaro was towed. The HOA claimed it was an abandoned vehicle. The invoice $300 plus storage fees was taped to my door like a ransom note. When I called Denise, she told me, "Classic cars attract the wrong kind of attention. We're trying to maintain a safe image." I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I poured a glass of bourbon and opened my laptop. See, 10 years earlier I had helped design this city's digital zoning system. I knew the code like the back of my hand. That's when I found a loophole so specific I thought it was a joke. My lot, due to some long-forgotten zoning classification, was technically cleared for vertical transit. Translation: I could legally build a personal helipad. And not just build it. Use it. I checked FAA regulations. Made sure I wasn't disrupting flight paths. Filed permits. Attended city planning meetings. Hired an engineer. Not one step required HOA approval. The charter had been written after the zoning law. Denise had no idea. Construction began where the Camaro was once towed. I told nosy neighbors it was an art installation titled Lost Freedom. One asked if it was a crop circle. I shrugged. By the time Denise noticed the wind indicators and boundary lights, it was too late. The city had approved everything. My permits were laminated and posted. I scheduled the final concrete pour during the HOA's next brunch party. Nothing ruins mimosas like a cement truck. She confronted me enraged. You can't just build an airport in a residential neighborhood. Not an airport, a helipad. Want to see the FAA compliance letter? She sputtered about children and chaos. I offered her a seat on the first flight. She turned red and stormed off. A reporter caught wind. When he asked to film the first landing, I said, "Bring popcorn." Installing a legal helipad was easier than getting a no parking sign through the HOA. The zoning law was a relic from a failed 1960s air corridor project. Nobody had used it in decades. My consultant, Drew, called it genius-level pettiness. Soon, the back of my property looked like a NASA pre-launch site. Denise began pacing her lawn with a visor and notepad. One of the workers told her we were building a really intense patio. I posted a flyer on the HOA bulletin board as part of a legally authorized zoning designation. Vertical transit operations may occasionally occur. Fully compliant with FAA and Municipal Code 74.2b. Denise called an emergency HOA meeting. I wasn't invited, but a neighbor live texted me. Her opening line, "He's bringing aircraft into a family zone." Someone asked if that was illegal. She said it should be. The next day, a cease and desist letter appeared. My lawyer laughed so hard he nearly cried. He fired back with a response so thick with citations it could be used as a paperweight. I picked an electric helicopter. Quiet. Small. FAA compliant. The aviation center salesman called me the driveway guy. Karen began unraveling, citing neighbors for wind chimes and visible trash cans. Then came the sabotage attempt. 2 figures caught on my cameras defacing the helipad markings at 3 a.m. Denise's VP and her dog walker. I forwarded the footage to the FAA and zoning office. The response was swift. Formal warnings. Compliance checks. Then the FAA officials visited. They loved the setup. Said it was safer than most hospital pads. One even asked if she could watch the first takeoff. As the big day approached, Denise tried to block the news crew with signage and even called the cops. The officers checked my permits, nodded, and gently asked her to leave the street. The mayor herself arrived, asked if she could film a short interview, and told me, "You've done more for this neighborhood than the HOA has in years." The helicopter arrived. The crowd gathered. The news drone hovered, and I lifted off. Above the HOA. Above Denise. Above the nonsense. The view was perfect. The sound electric hum. The peace unmatched. The mayor filmed. The neighbors cheered. Kids drew helicopters on the sidewalk in chalk. Even grumpy old Hank clapped. Back on the ground, the reporter asked, "How does it feel to take the high road literally?" I smiled. "I just wanted to park my car." Denise filed more complaints. All rejected. She tried to pass a new rule banning airborne vehicles. Failed. At the next HOA meeting, people finally spoke up. About her. About the money. About the lack of transparency. 2 board members resigned. A recall petition circulated. It passed. She hosted a community rally. Only 3 people showed up. Meanwhile, I held a helipad happy hour. The mayor came. We toasted with soda. Channel 5 aired a follow-up. It trended. A mural was painted. A STEM program launched a zoning curriculum called Sky's the Limit. Eventually, things calmed. The helipad became a weekend hangout. Kids learned about aviation. Neighbors became friends. I was offered a spot on the board. I declined. Instead, I nominated Miriam, a librarian who once memorized the HOA charter. She won unanimously. She rewrote the bylaws, made transparency mandatory. The HOA mellowed. The neighborhood bloomed. And at the center of it all, the helipad stood not as an act of spite, but as a symbol. A quiet reminder that when someone tries to bury you in red tape, you can always find a way to fly. Literally.